This is the start of what I hope will be a new series called Did I Ruin It?, in which I get a little braver than I have been in order to further love my traveler's notebooks, to customize them, to do things to them that make them feel more like mine. Today will be an adventure in conditioning a leather traveler's notebook, which is something I have not done before, and this is the state that my Camel Passport traveler's notebook is currently in. Now, the last time this TN was on my channel was in a setup video in which it appeared to be considerably fuzzier and a lot more orange, and since then I have been using it a lot more. It's gotten a tan in the sun, and it is a lot closer to the redder, really gorgeous, super aged, super loved Camel passports that I've fallen in love with on Instagram. It's starting to get a little bit shiny, which I really love, and I thought that if I conditioned it, I might be able to help it along in that direction a little bit sooner. So I purchased this leather balsam off of the Travelers Company USA website because this is the product that they actually recommend for their covers. And so that made me feel a little bit less nervous, but I still in the back of my head was wondering, am I going to ruin this notebook cover? I knew that it could potentially turn out looking pretty different. And so I made sure I read the instructions, and I figured, why not just go for it? This is the Travelers Company TN that I'm probably least attached to out of all of mine, so at the very least I would have a resource for you so you could see what might happen and maybe avoid a potential issue, or maybe this will give you some confidence. I guess we'll find out. Now, the first problem began when I took this little jar out of the box and noticed something. It says, for use on smooth leather, do not use on suede and nubuck type leather. And red flags are going up because this is a pretty fuzzy leather. It feels like suede. I don't know a ton about leather, but I know what different types of leather feel like, and I now am worried that I'm going to ruin this. However, one thing that I was considering is that I don't really like the fuzz on this cover, so maybe it will make it go away. Maybe it will be a good thing. So I figured, you know what, let's try a little bit, just a tiny little dab on the back cover, right near a big scuff that I have from keeping it in my bag, and we'll see what happens before we do the whole thing. Here's a closer look at what that little dab looks like, and then all that's left to do is wait. And here we are a few hours later, and I am feeling better about this already. So to me, it looks a little bit darker, but it also looks less fuzzy. You can definitely see the line of where that conditioner was versus what's all around it. And so that was kind of my goal, wasn't it? To get rid of some of this fuzz a little bit sooner. It's not as shiny as I was hoping it would be. Like, the scuff nearby is definitely shinier than this is, but I felt happy enough with that to add a little bit more, make that splotch a little bit larger, and see how that goes before we go all in. And there we go. This is still looking pretty good. I also like that you can still see that scuff because I do like the character that it added. It didn't get rid of it entirely. And so I'm interested to see how this conditioner actually contributes to aging the cover. So I also really like the smell of this stuff. It smells like a really nice hand lotion or something like that. So I'm not worried about getting it on my hands, and it did get on my desk a little bit, but I'll clean it up. But it came with its own sponge, and it just says to kind of use the sponge to rub it in all over the surface. And I actually thought that this was pretty fun to do. Once I was no longer quite so worried about how it would turn out, I became excited to see how it would turn out, and I enjoyed the process. I've also heard that there are other leather conditioners out there, and some of them change the color more than this one does. This one did warn that it would make the leather a little bit darker, potentially, and I was okay with that already. I wanted a kind of darker, redder camel than the lighter orange one that I ended up with. It does seem like, from what I've heard, that the Camel Travelers Company leather has changed over time, depending on when you got yours. They used to be different than they are now. And I've watched a lot of review videos, and I've also seen some videos of ones that have been really well loved and well used. And so they also change just while you're using them, and depending on the different conditions that you have them in, or how often you're using them, and whether you're babying them or you just kind of throw them in your bag with your keys. And so it's all a bit of an adventure, it's a bit of an experiment, and this is just part of this one's journey now. I have committed to it, and we'll see how it goes. And there we are. I'm gonna give this one a little bit more time before I touch it, just because I did put more on this time. Give it plenty of chances to dry, and I'm already really excited. I know it's not gonna be this dark once it dries, but I think that this is more me already. Over 24 hours later, here we are. It is pretty much completely dry. Another worry that I had about this was that I wouldn't be able to hold my journal without the balsam coming off on my hands, and I didn't feel like that was an issue. It absorbed very well in this particular cover, maybe because it was more of a matte finish, fuzzy leather versus a smooth leather, so that's a bonus. And you can see here it looks just really warm, and it is a little bit shiny, and it's so pretty. This is great. I really feel like it sped up what I wanted it to do. You can see when I zoom up really close that there is still a little bit of a fuzzy texture. It's just not as prominent or noticeable as it was before I conditioned it. It's especially in the places on the cover that I don't touch super often, so on the spine and on the corners. And so I would say if you love the fuzzy suede-like finish on your traveler's notebook, maybe don't do this to it, but if you're not as big of a fan of the fuzzy leathers and you prefer a smoother leather, this could kind of help put it in that direction sooner. I had already lost a fair amount of the fuzz just from everyday use, from holding this cover in my hands. So the other thing I noticed is that after I conditioned it, it is scratching up more easily than it was before. Before, when I scratched it, I think the scratches got kind of lost in the fuzz. And so I like this. I'm looking forward to having this journal be all scratched up and look really used and loved. So that's a plus for me. It might not be for you. Plenty of considerations for you if you're thinking about doing this to one of your traveler's notebooks, but I'm really happy with this. I'm very pleased with how it came out. I was nervous, especially once I saw that warning message on the side of the container, so I think we're in a pretty good spot. I feel pretty good about this. Here is a side-by-side comparison of what it looked like before I conditioned it, and then what it looked like right after being conditioned on the front and the back. And you can see there is a pretty big difference in the color. Darker, redder, less fuzzy, like I had said. And actually, right after I filmed this video, I ended up taking this on vacation with me, and I just threw it into my backpack, and I wanted to see what would happen. And here's what it looked like after a couple of weeks of drying, but also getting bumped and knocked around and scratched up while on a trip with me. Now, I do want to point out that it was a little bit sunnier when I filmed this particular clip, and so I tried to correct for it where I could in my editing program, but that does change it a little bit. But what you can see here is that it is not quite as dark as it was, and it is showing those scratches better than it was before I conditioned it. This is the color and the look that I was hoping for when I purchased the Camel in the first place. It isn't completely smooth and shiny. You can see here, especially around the edges and the corners, it does have a little bit of that fuzz left, but similar to what I mentioned earlier, it's not as noticeable or as soft as it was before I conditioned it. But the places that get the most wear, like the top and bottom of the front cover, are really shiny and smooth and starting to show some lovely scratches. Here are a few more side-by-side comparisons. So on the left side you have a day after I conditioned the leather, and on the right side you have after I went on a trip with it a few weeks later, like 2 weeks later. Pretty cool. And on the left here is before I conditioned it, and on the right side is 2 weeks after conditioning. I think they're pretty similar, honestly. The one on the right side is shinier, less fuzzy, and a little bit more red, a little bit less orange. Overall, I don't think I ruined it, and I'm feeling pretty good about potentially doing this to more of my traveler's notebooks in the future. So I have a very smooth and shiny blue standard size and a passport brown that's getting a little bit dry, so I might test this out on those next. Would you want to see in a future video how those turn out? Just let me know in the comments below. I would also love to hear if you are a fan of traveler's notebooks, have you ever conditioned your leathers, and what type of conditioner did you use? How did it turn out? Which colors were you conditioning? Would you recommend that I try it with more of my notebooks, or did you have a bad experience with any of them that I should try to avoid? I hope that this was helpful or interesting to you, and I'm looking forward to posting another video for you soon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.